It's not often I use the term life-changing to describe a whiskey, but there really is no other word to describe this. Welcome back, Dram Fam, to the Whisky Diary. So welcome to the first in a series of a new format of review that I'm going to try and do. Just going to try and keep it short, 5 minutes or so, that really just gets down to what is it and is it good. So let's get into it. A friend of mine, a guy called Josh, I've known Josh for many years. We've had many an incredible night out. He introduced me to a whiskey which I can find next to no information about. I've only looked in this book for information about it and I couldn't find anything. So I can only assume that it's so rare that it's priceless. So the little bit of information I could find out about it is that it's a Canadian whiskey. And as a result, I can only assume that the pronunciation is French. This is Firabal, I believe, whiskey. It is bottled at 33%. I can only assume that's because of the amount of time it's spent in its cask. The only date I can find surrounding this whiskey is 1984. So we can just assume that this is a 1984 vintage. That makes it that many years old. I'm not sure I've ever tried anything quite like this. That amount of time in the cask has done some incredible things to the palate. So this is technically a Canadian whiskey, but I mean, we can only infer that from the pronunciation. It's got a flavour profile like I've never seen before. As I say, it's bottled at 33%. It is a 70 centilitre bottle. And given that I couldn't find any information on it in this book alone, it must be priceless. So let's get on to the tasting. First things first, incredibly thick and viscous. On the nose, smells quite grainy initially. Massive hints of sugar, some baking spices, oak, suffering. And on the tail end of it, a nice delicious creaminess onto the palate. That texture really coming through. Quite a lot of those baking spices right up front. There's one particular spice I cannot put my finger on what it is. Quite often see it in cookies and stuff like that. Loads and loads of sweetness. Burning, regret. And there's a subtle... what do you call it? Like a subtle rye note maybe on the tail end of it. On the finish, loads more baking spices. Again, that one specific baking spice I cannot put my finger on. Loads of that coming forward. Loads more of that sweetness. I'm getting hints of bad decisions. But quite a warming finish, I would say. Upon revisiting, definitely more of those baking spice notes, more of that heat. A subtle floral note really does persist throughout. Tons of what I can only assume is oak. I'd be really interested to know what casks this was finished in, because I've never tasted anything quite like it. It must be a Canadian thing. I've not had many Canadian whiskies. And this has got a very distinct, unique flavour, which I've not tasted a lot from Scotch. So if anyone has any bottles of this, I'd be really keen to know where you got it from. And if there are any auctioneers or valuers out there, if you have any idea what kind of resale value might be on this, I'd be very keen to hear, because as I say, I can find out next to nothing about it. But anyway, that's enough from me. If you've liked this video, please do click the like button down below. And if you'd like to support the channel, please do consider subscribing. Remember, before commenting, check the upload date of a video. And on that note, Slanjavar.